So just so you know where you are, if you haven't figured it out already from us talking back and forth, continuous integration with Acquia. Our company, 4Kitchens, uses Circle CI for a lot of our continuous integration. So I wanted to provide an example that used Circle CI since Travis seems to be, I guess, something you can find a little bit more often. I wanted to contribute something a little different than, I guess, a little bit off the beaten path, since Circle CI is probably the second most used continuous integration system out there. So with that said, I'd like to introduce myself. If you've never come to a talk in the Midwest or Texas, then you probably haven't ever seen me before. I am your speaker in overalls, General Redneck. As my alias is what I go by whenever I speak. Alan Chappelle. I am the support lead, technical lead at 4Kitchens. I lead the technical team through in our support division. You can find me pretty much anywhere on the internet as General Redneck. That's Drupal, GitHub, Twitter. So I'm pretty much the only one out there. I had to fight someone for the Twitter handle though. About 4Kitchens, if you haven't heard yet, our little spiel is that we make content go. We do really complicated solutions. That's like our gig. We also have a bunch of different varying technologies we do. We're only a 40-person shop, but we do some really interesting projects. We have a Node.js portion of the company as well as a Drupal portion of the company. So our leadership is really good about listening to what developers want to do and letting us find a client to do it on. So it's a lot of fun. Hit us up if you're interested in any of that. So I kind of want to just jump right on into it. In continuous integration, I give a lot of talks about the things you want whenever you do continuous integration. How many of you have actually tried to implement like a continuous delivery or continuous integration for pull requests and whatnot? For example, what type of technologies do you use whenever you normally introduce CI?
Right now we're looking at, right now we're starting with Bamboo,
Mm-hmm.
the Elastic Suite, and going to our own custom VMware setups. We're looking at Pipeline, Cloud CD.
Cool.
To augment that. A lot of our focus is trying to get testing in there.
Yeah. Talk to the gentleman behind you about pipelines. You're the only Acquia representative I know of in the room right at the moment, so hey, I might point out to you a little bit. I am in no way affiliated with Acquia. I just sit back and heckle. I'm sorry, pipelines. It sounds like a really interesting solution. I haven't gotten to use it yet. Honestly, a lot of our clients are on Pantheon, so this was actually an interesting new development for us because we wanted something that behaved a little bit like Pantheon. I don't know how many of y'all have used Pantheon in the past. Okay, have you ever used their Quicksilver functionality? Okay, so Greg Anderson and the team over there has done some really good work on providing a functionality that is very much like cloud hooks. How many of you have done cloud hooks for Acquia? Okay, cool. So they've provided something very much like that, but they have it's a more, like, I would say, newer system or new technology. But Acquia's cloud hooks are really good for getting the content over, but you still have to have something before that. And before that are pretty much all these requirements that we're looking at. These are things that we need to develop to get up to that point of where we can provide some continuous integration. So in this particular case, we want to use a source artifact repo system. How many of you have done pull request reviews on code where you're doing it on the artifact on an artifact repo. And just to clarify, artifact repo, if you don't know what it is where you commit all your modules, all your contributed modules, all of your SAS being compiled into CSS, all that all together. And that's the way like Pantheon and Acquia both work. You felt the pain of trying to be like, oh man, they upgraded field collections. That's like 1,000 files. Crap. How do I figure out where they put that one, little patch or something in there to sneak it in? I mean, I'm not saying be untrustworthy of your developers, but it's really good to be able to, review their work. So a source repo allows you to get that you do a get ignore on specific files throughout the repository. You get better review. And then something that we like to do is your develop branch. We use Git flow at our company, by the way. So you have your development releases and master branch. So it's really handy for us to have our develop branch with everything integrated, tested, and viewable from an environment. So for instance, in our case, we want to use dev. And stage as master, because in the Acquia environment, prod is only a tag. It's a tag that you want to release. That's typically the way it's done. So we're talking about taking master and putting it to stage, because then you want to actually have the client, for instance, review everything as you get ready to release. That's why we call that a requirement. Back up the environment we are deploying to. I don't know how many times there's been that edge case where a client said, oh, but I made a quick change to a piece of content there, but now it's gone, or something of that nature. I know it's been a testing environment, but it's nice to be able to say, I can retrieve that. So making a backup is always a good thing, and somehow link your commits back to the original source. So for instance, if I do an artifact build, can I easily distinguish where that build is at against the source? So like on GitHub, I'm on CBF21. Is that what's been deployed to the environment, that commit, or not? And how do you figure that out? Artifact builds sometimes can be really, really challenging there, so that's something I add as a requirement. Now, to kind of illustrate some of these things, we do local builds. We want to be able to actually produce the site on our system so that we can see what's going to happen on production when we push it. Way I do it, how many of you have ever used Drush shell aliases before? Okay, cool. It's really, really neat feature that I didn't learn about till a couple of years ago. And that's, you can run a set of scripts as a shell, as a Drush command. So for instance, we make Drush fresh, Drush local, and Drush prod. So Drush fresh, that's our command that says, hey, I want to take the database that we have from production or something, import it in, import the files in if we do that, and then we're good to go. Drush local says, all right, do the build steps, your updb, configuration import, all that stuff, but also make sure that you include the devel modules, so on and so forth, so you can do your development work. And then Drush prod is what you would release without the development stuff. Now with Circle CI, we have here's what we want to do with Circle CI. We want to download our global tools and dependencies for building and grab the latest database from Acquia. Now this is where I'm actually going to it sucks because I don't dual monitor on a projection. So we're going to go off to the code and jump back and forth to see, so that you can see what we're doing here. I wanted to iterate what I'm doing in plain English, because I don't know how many of you are proficient at looking at code on someone else's editor on a projection screen. It's, for me, it's a challenge. So plain English sometimes it's really, really easy to see what we're doing. But I want to show you the code because I want to show you how it works, some of the inner workings. But these are the things we're going to do. We're going to download our global dependencies for building. So Composer, Gulp, etc. Grab a latest database from Acquia. So we can do that with a drush command or something of that nature. We want to build the site as if we're doing local development. This is it's our testing ground. We want to be able to, since as of not until like noon today, I never knew that you could get more environments than just the 3 that you get on Acquia. Dustin was so happy to tell me that they're coming out with a very much like multi-dev thing for Acquia, which will be cool because what we end up doing is we spin up Pantheon multi-devs and then do all of our like our Behat testing and stuff against that. But since we can't do that in this particular case, I'm building a quick little site on Circle CI. We run the test. If it's develop or master branch, let's deploy. Okay, so I want to put develop on dev and master on test, and then let's get it. Let's check out the Acquia Git repo, and let's add all the assets that we have that we built using Circle CI. So another really cool thing is, how many of you have had that one person who decided that he is never going to upgrade Node.js again? It's going to be 4.4.3 or something like that. And for some reason we've got our new prefixers out and everything, and it's just not working for him because he gets the old version because he's got the old version Node. And so his CSS is always different from everybody else's when you commit. Doing it this way, where we add all the assets that we build during testing, during your circle, like during your continuous integration phase, is a really handy way to mitigate that problem. We can build it all on the same environment. In fact, if you make your environment on Circle emulate the environment that you're developing against, let's say Acquia in this case, then you actually get something that is optimized for Acquia environment. So for instance, if you're running 5.6, PHP 5.6 on Acquia, make sure Circle CI is running 5.6. That's all I'm getting at, that kind of thing. And then you can build all your assets there. That way you don't have the whole the version dependency mix-ups there. And then we commit and force push history to Acquia. So Pantheon does things a little bit differently. There's 2 different methodologies to the artifact source. 2 different methodologies to get your artifact and your source repositories. One of them is a completely separate artifact repository. You have something over here build, then it copies all the files over from your source repository, your GitHub, to a folder, does all the builds, changes the git ignore, and then commits to the artifact repository. That's like, so you have 2 totally different commits, histories, going down here. That's where the matching up gets kind of complicated. You got to know which commit matches up with what. There's another methodology which I'm using that Pantheon uses, which is an artifact commit as opposed to a repository. It's kind of messy to a lot of people because you have orphaned commits throughout the lay of the land, but it's really handy because you know where you are in history versus the 2 repositories. So that's a methodology I used in this one, which is commit. We pull down everything from GitHub, basically. Then we add everything we built on Circle CI, and then we change the git ignore it. Then we force push it. to Acquia. And then that way we get the history changes back up to sync up with GitHub with one additional commit. That's the whole idea. Now, there's another thing we're going to do with Cloud Hooks here, which is we want to back up the environment. We want to show our, on all of our non-prod environments and copy, on all of our non-prod environments, we want to copy the files and stuff over from production. So like if you're moving over to dev, you always want to build against what prod is now so that you can get that continuous integration thing going on. So that you know like, okay, some person over here in editorial said, hey, it'd be really cool if I built this piece of content this special way, and somehow it breaks your feature, or they add a new menu item and you weren't expecting that or something like that. You get that with this build and you'll be able to see that. And then on dev, we'll run Drush local, then on everywhere else we do prod. Now I'm going to switch over out of presentation and kind of go out over here to show you what all is going on. So I use Visual Studio Code. It's gotten really good. I highly suggest this to people who are doing PHP development now, even on Linux. And its Vim capabilities is about the best emulation I have ever seen. So if you're a Vim user, that's my plug for that. Now to kind of jump into things, I'm going to skip the whole Drush RC stuff because you can look that up. I mean, this is Drush RC. This is how you do Drush shell aliases. You put your scripts basically in an array, and that's how that's done. So that's our typical Drupal 8 build. That's the way that works. Circle is its own thing. Now, I'm actually going to give you links to this repository, and it has all the documentation that I'm providing in the code in a README. So it'll be easy for you to actually copy and paste things over if you want to use this verbatim. I've tried to make it generic enough to where you can switch out the pieces you want and work with the environment you want. But the idea is we provide these things up here in Circle CI's user interface. So we've got an Acquia user token, the environment that we want to pull from is prod or stage. In my case, it's stage because I have a free account right at the moment. They don't give me a production. The Acquia endpoint changes for very specific people, and then we have a realm, the site, repo, etc. This will take a little bit of setup for you because you have to create an account that will be your bot. Okay, highly suggest you don't make it yourself. Security, disclaimer, etc. Don't do that. You've been warned. All right, so just to kind of go about what we're doing here. This is Circle 1, by the way. How many of you have been working with Circle 2? Okay. Circle 2 is the Docker implementation. I haven't gotten the chance to translate this over, but it is the next thing I'm going to do, and it's so much faster. This build runs in roughly 6 minutes or so. Some of my coworkers have gotten their rebuilds to get as slow as 1 or 2 minutes on rebuilding a machine to test against. It's whenever you save your containers and whatnot. So we do a couple of things. We set up some global commands. I always do this first. You want to fail quick. Lint your code. Make people complain about you linting your code because that's our very first quality thing, thing we want to do for quality. Then we do a build, which is, in this particular case, I've taken all of my commands that build my theme, my Sass, minimize my JS, optimize my images, and put it in a gulp task. You can change this to whatever you use to do that, whether it be Compass, whatever. But that's how I do it. It's really, really simple that way. And then we go in here and do some more specifics on setting up our environment. In particular, I make a new Drush alias. I give my environment its settings, and then we get the database from production. So these are a couple of custom scripts that have been written. Get DB backup and get DB ID. These particular scripts they're open source out there in the world right now. Go and they look for your latest backup on Acquia, and then they download it. That's the whole gist of it. So that way you don't have to. You're not hitting your production database by trying to pull it down with a SQL dump. That's not good. So backup is good enough. It happened last night. So, typically you're not going to have that much change between the night before and now. Then we do a fresh and a local. So fresh, I told you, switches out the database, and then local says do everything like I would in a local environment. Now, I've actually while I was developing on this, found out that Acquia has a rate limit on hitting their API. So got to be careful about that. If you're building over and over and over again, you might find that this doesn't work like you expected it to on a free account. So just saying, they gimp us whenever it's coming up to some of these lower level tier plans and whatnot. Now, I cheated, and I was working on doing all this, so I took out my Apache configuration. But this is essentially all this right here is saying, hey, start up Apache for me, and then we test. Please don't test like this. Please put something more in there. I like to put a nice big troll face over here sometimes. That's a good test. But try something like Bahat or some regression testing. Obviously, that's outside the realm of this talk, but do that. Now, this is important. This says for develop and master and anything with release, go ahead and push it to Acquia. I want to sometimes change stage to a different release depending on, if we've got multiple development things going on. So I go ahead and just take care of that situation right here by adding that branch to this too. And then the rest of this is, okay, set up our Git, fetch our Acquia repository, change the git ignore file, which if you want to look at that really quick, looks like this. Everything that you want on Acquia for git ignore goes down here. Everything you want on the rest of your project, as well as Acquia, goes up here. That's the whole idea. Then we use a simple sed and cut the file. And whenever we do a commit, it looks something like, then it's just, this portion is git ignored. Because you want all these files on your Acquia repository whenever you're doing an artifact build. I know that's where we're talking about the big changes in your repository size again and trying to identify who changed what, but it only works that way. And then, of course, after we get done with that, this is important. In your vendors folder, all it is a bunch of other projects get checked out. You know how much that screws with a Git repository? So we get rid of all the Git get folders. That's all this is right here. It says, hey, we don't want them because we're trying to check everything in. Something people kind of say not to do, and then get add, get commit, get push. And the rest of this is history. I put a nice little message in here saying, if you have this branch over on your Acquia environment, it's going to get built. So we talked about cloud hooks a little bit in here. So in this case, I have master on dev. I have stage on a tag. Most of the time, if I was doing this for a client, I would have prod, but it was cheap. And I got the free plan, so I only have 2 environments. If I would like to upgrade in 8 days, I would get, but I'm not forking out that money for this. So in this case, I skipped one. So now I'm going to just show you everything from master. And then we deploy to stage. So I've made the scripts in an easily configurable way so that you can set your canonical to be whatever you want to pull from. If you want to pull from dev for your main database and whatnot, go right ahead. Be my guest, but it's made for whichever one that you let your end users take care of, which could be stage if you haven't went to launch yet. You may actually have your editors over here in stage doing their content editing. It's a valid technique. So you're probably pretty used to this environment, what goes on here. So cloud hooks, since I have cloud hooks enabled, will only run whenever the master branch is changed in this case. So let's go back to my code. Let's take a look. Since y'all are kind of familiar with cloud hooks, you'll notice I have this hooks directory, I have common, and then I have postcode deploy. Now, Dustin and I were sitting there talking about a little bit. This script right here could probably be rewritten to use a less linear approach, but for the sake of getting stuff out there and getting something deployed, I actually went for a linear approach. Like I didn't throw in a hook after post database import and so on and so forth. Are y'all familiar pretty much for what the different hooks are or what you can use? Okay, there's a Git repository that I can link to, and I'll just show you real quick. There it is, and it's really fast. So here's the different hooks you can do. You can do it on common, which I'm using common, means every environment. Dev, prod, or test. Okay, these are different environments. You can use other environments if you have them. And it's just a different name of a folder. In each of these, so for instance, if I wanted it to only run on dev for some reason, I would put it in this folder. If I want to run on everything, I would put it in the common folder. In this case, I'm doing something like, these are the different hooks you have. One is postcode deploy, postcode update, DB copy, files copy them, and web activate. So with each of those, this is when you say on the interface, change the branch or change the tag or something like that through the interface screen. This one says whenever I push code up to something that already has an interface. So in my case, like the master branch, do it there. And DB copy and files copy, it's kind of obvious what's happening there. Honestly, I've never seen the web activate one used before. So yeah. So that's something really handy to know about when you're doing continuous integration with Acquia. So taking a look at that, they give you a bunch of examples. I stole this straight from the example. This is everything that an Acquia Cloud Hook sends to every single script. So you can variabilize them. Now, there's a couple of things that have to happen when we're working with Cloud Hooks. There's two different runtimes we're talking about here. We're talking about Circle CI. It's done. It's done its thing. Then it pushed the code up to Acquia. So now we're on another server. The problem is that Acquia doesn't have the same, it doesn't have access to all those variables you set up on Circle CI. So there's a little bit of dual setup we have to do here. One, for Circle CI, you had to declare all those variables that I showed you in circle.yaml, which are these right up here, right? All the Acquia variables. I know it looks like a lot, but it really isn't. I pretty much give you how to find those. And then the other is over here for your Cloud Hooks. Now, we have the Acquia user and Acquia token that we're recycling here. Those two do not commit API keys to your Git repository. Disclaimer, security. Just saying. So what we do here, there's actually a really cool technique that Acquia recommends, and that is to create a no backup directory on your site's server. So this is part of your file system. You can SSH in there to this directory, which you actually start right here. Whenever you SSH in, you start at site. You can go to, let's say this was the test server, or let's say this was the dev server that I'm pushing to. To be able to get these to run, you have to go to your SSH to your dev server, in the dev folder, create a no backup folder, and then put in a file called bashkeys.sh. This is kind of a really cheap way to do things, but it's really simple. So with that said, you have something that looks like it'll have Acquia user equals something like, in my case, alan@4kitchens.com. And then it has Acquia token equals, and then whatever my token is. You can easily get to your token through your Acquia profile, which is over here. Go over here, go to your profile, take a look at your credentials screen. Now, I'm not actually going to show you what my API key is because we're recording this and stuff, but you get to see it right there. Okay, that's the thing you're going to copy and paste in there. What happens when you hit show anyway? So that's a really quick, easy thing to do. I highly suggest you use something like this with no backup with your settings files as well. Something that we like to do is, let me find my settings.php. This right here. We have a settings.secrets.php that we do not commit to our repository. Yes, Dustin, we have committed to our repository in the past. We do not anymore, right? He used to work with me, by the way. He's a fellow 4Kitchener. So, alumni, I guess is, yeah. And so you can create a settings.secrets.php and put it in that no backup directory. Then just include it with the rest of your stuff right here. And you can put API keys in there. Now, there's a little bit more work because it's on a per environment thing, right? You have to go manually push up a file to each environment. But you know what that also means? That means you can have a different key for dev and one for prod without ever having to have them exposed in the code. Because even private repositories can be accessed with the right Slack channel. I don't know if y'all remember that happening back in the day where they were hacking, getting people's Slack identifiers through GitHub with the correct, very crafted search query. Yeah, because it's interesting. and a lot of people's Slacks got hacked. So just saying, your company may have been one of those Slack channels that did not change their API key, and your Git repo could be at risk. So there, I lost my train of thought there for a second. All right, so Cloud Hooks, that's where we were. So Cloud Hook, I'm going to explain really quick what happens here. Basically, I'm saying, doing a little bit of validation here, saying, okay, if you haven't set it up yet, I'm going to tell you about it. Cool. Then we go over here and we log in to the API, because for some reason, even though you're on Acquia server, you still have to log into Acquia API. Just a thing. I've kind of figured it would be something built in, but no, it's not. So we go. I actually added a really cool feature of skipping a build. So have you ever had that time whenever you know that when you push to production, that if something builds, that everything's going to either A, take so long that it's unnecessary, or B, something's going to die. That's why this is there. You can literally put a file into no backup that says skip build, and these will cease to function. And that's it's saved some skin a couple of times. For instance, like when a client did custom configuration on the server and we didn't know about it till the last minute or something like that. That's when that's happened. Now there's a helper script down here for because I do things sequentially. If you've ever used the API before, you know that when you make a call, it makes the call and then it comes back, says, I made the call, I'm done. But you never know whenever it's actually finished unless you sit there and look at the status of you can call a status command in the API and say, is it waiting, running, success, or failure. That's basically what you get back. So what I ended up finding out there running was a wait for cloud done command. So we sit there, we say, okay, we want to do a database copy, and it sits there and it checks to see when it gets done. So that happens on both database copy and files copy. Now, this whole bit right here is, okay, if I'm on dev and my canonical environment is prod, okay, I'm on dev, so I want to pull prod down to dev. That's the purpose of this piece. If I'm on stage, I'm building stage right now, I want to pull prod to stage because I want it to reflect what I have over there. If you're on prod though, prod is prod, so don't worry about it, right? So in this case, then we start doing, we also have a very specific bit down here for if we're doing dev. Now, notice I have if statements here. We could have probably went through and refactored this pieces to be different commands in that cloud hook, but I decided not to because this keeps it all the logic in one space, and it's a little bit easier to see it all at once. So we're cool there. So these are all the different pieces. Now let's take a look back at what we were doing now. We have a piece of code we want to commit. So we go up to GitHub, we do our pull request. We approve it and it gets merged into, and in this case let's say master because I'm using master branch. What happens then is Circle takes over. We get something like this. It goes through, runs all its commands, and then at the very end we pass testing, and since it's master, we do a deployment. So this is an overview. Okay. Then we get this message down here. If deployment was successful, we check out Acquia Cloud. you'll come over here to your Acquia, which I moved from. Give me 1 second and get back. Well, that is embarrassing. I got it on tape too. Let's see. And then we come back over here and you'll actually see a test log. When you push something up, you get a commit section action here. And for the first 3 or 4 minutes when it's building, you'll get something like this. So it's going through, it's running, you'll get something that's empty. You'll see this right here. This is part of the suspenseful part of continuous integration with Acquia, is you don't get to see what's happening till it's done. So what we'll be waiting, we'll see this, and then whenever it gets done with the output from that server or servers from that commit, you'll actually see the output. Now notice right now, I'm actually failing because of something's up with my configuration between the two sites. It's not importing correctly, but you get to see this. And now you know that it's doing that it's actually doing a build, and that you actually get to see what's happening here. Now, this is a failure of me to do the first step of this whole continuous integration thing, which is develop locally. Just letting you know, I cheated and I tried to just push something straight up, and that's what happened there. So I didn't test it, and I'm owning up to my mistake. That's admit it is the first step, is it not? So that's where we are there. But then, after everything goes correctly, you should be able to just go over here and click on your environment and actually see that you have the new feature installed on your site. And that's the whole idea of continuous integration. At this point, unfortunately, I can't show you a new feature being pushed because obviously I broke something, so I got to go figure it out. But with that said, this gives you an idea. I did get this whole site up here to begin with using this methodology, though. And I could go back through the history and show you that. With all that said, we were on Acquia Cloud. So that's pretty much tying it all together. How many of you did I lose during all that? Okay. So since we're at that point, let's just go into questions. What is it that y'all don't understand about this particular workflow? And if you want to, go for it. Where did I lose you?
Kind of lost for the first while until I started getting the whole picture.
Yeah, it's a whole picture. The idea is, let's use a system, in this case Circle CI, to take our pull request, build the stuff that is dynamic, and then push it to Acquia, and let Acquia take care of doing the actual deployment part of it, which is like your drush commands and things that you would normally go. I mean, you could have done it like this. Let's say Circle CI. Let's take Circle CI out of the picture. You developed your thing, what you're going to do. What you would do manually is something along the lines of, all right, I've got my master branch, I want to release it. First thing I got to do is go in there and run my thing to get my SAS and Composer install and all that stuff in order. All right, cool. Next thing I need to do is make sure that the get ignore is different, or copy over all these files from here to there, to my Acquia repository. That would be the next. Then you commit it. Okay. Now you've got when you do that git push, your code's up there. You have You have everything that you developed on Acquia at that point. So the next step would be, all right, you get to the point where it do its normal thing, and let me get over here to their environment. You get to this point where you'd see dev, and you'd see this down here at the bottom, commit. And it wouldn't find any cloud hooks at that point because we didn't develop any. We're saying we're doing this without continuous integration, right? You'd get this, so you'd see a whole thing of your commit. And if you wanted to, at that point, then you'd say, okay, well, I want to show what's on develop. So I'm going to go here, drag this over there, hit copy, etc. Okay. Then the next thing you'd do is you'd go over here to your command line, say drush at whatever, db up, then drush at whatever, all that CR, good stuff. What I'm proposing with these files, with this code, is you don't have to do that. Now, it's in several pieces, right? We have Circle CI, which if we take out the whole testing piece, we have this, which is something special. This is the command I use to make my SaaS work, right? And then we have, and there's actually a composer install that happens automatically with Circle CI. So it's actually running composer install. So I get all my modules and stuff automatically that way. But then we get this piece, which was essentially what I was saying. Copy all your files from here to there and hit commit, right? That's how you get it up to Acquia. Then the other piece was in this cloud hook, which is pretty much, this is our drag and drop piece right here. I drag and drop my database from prod to dev. I drag and drop my files from prod to dev. Then I run drush cr, drush up db, etc. Now, the part you're probably not seeing with that is the drush part, which is this right here. Drush update database, drush cache rebuild, config and sync. And this was one we add because sometimes we change entity schemas when we're developing, and that's a really good helper command. But in general, most of the time you see this to this in most people's builds. And basically, with these three pieces tied together, you get all that together. Does that kind of tie it together, or?
Yeah, I mean, you can go back one step though before where you've done your coding and testing it locally.
Yes.
That's all before the skill change.
Yep, that's all before this.
All right.
This is when when you had someone review your code and they said it's good, let's merge it. Yeah. Yep. That's where continuous deployment starts. We'll put it that way. Integration is literally getting to the point of where you can merge your code all together. Continuous integration is like, okay, you're working on something, he's working on something, and then we've got to smash them together and they still test out good. That's what integration is for. Where continuous deployment is, let's get it from, all right, everything's tested out good, now let's get it to prod. There's prod everywhere. Something like that. What's up?
So I would say, I guess kind of the thought process behind this is, it's nice that it makes your code review easier. It's nice that it makes your repository smaller. But the reason you have to worry about this kind of stuff now is because this is where you're going. This is Drupal. The fact that it's composer based, you can still download the tarball and all of Drupal. I don't know if that's going to go away, but the new recommended way to use Drupal is through composer. So this is just a way to automate a lot of directory as well.
So just to jump in here, let's take Composer out of this equation. How much time do you spend deploying the site? Like, I'm in support. I have 15 clients. Some of them have upwards of 3 sites. All of them have at least 3 environments. Okay? So if I am the one personally doing all of the, git, commit, push, git, then drush, cr, my fingers do not work as fast as this thing does. And on top of that, it's not tying me up. It's like my bosses tell me I'm a valuable resource, something along those lines, and they'd rather me be over here in my code editor doing something else than on a command line telling the deployment server that it needs to do the same thing it did 20 times. It's just that's where that comes in, and it's also repetitive. It's if you can get your stuff to a point where you can repeat a process, you can test that process, and that we're in that cycle, right? I mean, it's a where if you do it manually, it can be different every single time. Oh, whoops! I typed in sudo rm rf. Whoops! That happened to what was it? The guys who did Toy Story. Pixar. That happened to Toy Story 4 times. Because they had a manual process of cleaning up their server, and some guy went in there and accidentally, RMRF'd everything 4 times. So that's part of my spiel on this, is that it takes time up front to set this up for a project, about 8 hours. And that's being generous if you have a template, okay? If you're doing it yourself, it takes a little longer, right? You're in there, you're messing with stuff, it's exciting, and then before you know it, it's like 40 hours. But if you do that ahead of time, I guarantee you that between your testing environment, your dev environment, the stage environment, this computer will hit that 40 hours in a project's time. Most of my projects most of the projects that are on our build side go about 9 months. I don't know, that's a lot of builds. So just something to think about. It will pay you back for that. Yeah.
So it's kind of implicitly in there, but do you use this for gated check-ins on your artifact builds?
Sorry, I didn't catch that. What was that last part?
Gated check-ins, making sure that only fully tested build code gets into the artifact repository.
That's the idea. It should be. In this case, it wouldn't, because let me show you. Where's circle? There it is. This is not a valid test. Okay. With that said, we do, as part of our review process on a pull request, we always do a code review and a functional review. It's part of our process. On several of our projects, in addition to that, we have automated testing, whether it be visual regression testing, behavioral driven, or functional. We don't have a standard on the amount and or ways we test yet. It's something we're trying to do to build as a company, but this doesn't happen most of the time. Every once in a while, there's that one 9-hour project or whatever that you got. That's exaggeration. Projects are always bigger than 9 hours, but there's that one project that's I did this on a D6 site. Just saying, we weren't going to be supporting them for very long, so I did this. So in general, yes, you're gated by both process and automated testing.
You just rely on Circle CI to do the notifications and sending emails about build failures and stuff like that, or do you actually explicitly put things like that into your scripts?
You know, you can actually tell GitHub to not allow a merge if Circle is failing.
I've seen notifications like for Slack or chat or email or whatever you do to actually say, hey, build failed.
I rely on email personally. I mean, I know we can do that, in the possibilities here, but that's not part of our workflow. At Four Kitchens, typically we do that as part of one. The person who reviewed it usually comes in after the Circle build failed, lets the person know. Now, again, you're right. Automation in that point would save that person's time from coming in there and saying, "Hey, look, your Circle's failing. I'm not going to do this." Push it off onto someone else. But yeah, I get where you're going with that. Hopefully, I just answered your question well enough, though.
I was supposed to try to figure out Circle did it for you to be able to put it in the scripts.
Oh no, you'd have to put in a script. Yeah. Circle doesn't have integration, as far as I know, right offhand to send Slack. I'd have to look into that one though. That's actually a really good idea. I know we can do it through a script though, because Pantheon does it through Quicksilver. That's they give you some example scripts on how to do it. Anything else? Well, guys, I appreciate y'all putting up with me being up here. I know that for several of you, it's probably really hard to sit through this whole thing because it's really technical and whatnot, and gets into code on a projector. But if you feel like ever hit me up for a question, feel free to hit me up on Twitter, email me. You can get to me through the contact form on Drupal. Also, a couple of quick plugs. If you ever want to check out my modules that I develop on Drupal, I've got Views Natural Sort I'm a maintainer of, and Views Services I'm a maintainer of. So if anything else, thank y'all much, and y'all have a good one.